Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales, proudly presented by Membrain. This podcast is your gateway to mastering the craft of modern selling. If you're passionate about growth, impact, and unlocking full potential in sales and revenue, you're in the right place. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And now let's get started with today's guest.
Today on the Art and Science of Complex Sales, we're diving into what it really means to lead from the front, to align teams around accountability, and to build sales playbooks that work in the real world. Today is Mark Grundy. He's the founder of MFG Solutions Consulting, and he's helping B2B CEOs turn underperforming sales teams into a consistent, accountable, and result-driven revenue engine. And he does this all without a full-time sales leader. He is a fractional leader. He's been doing this for more than 13 years. He's been the go-to fractional for companies across tech, healthcare, construction, and industrial sectors. So let's get started with Mark Grundy. Mark Grundy, how are you, my friend?
I'm good, Paul. Hey, thanks for having me on. This is great. I'm looking forward to this.
I appreciate you coming on. Our border, we share a border with each other. So we got a lot of things to talk about, sales, trade, all of those things. But first, let's start. You mind just giving your quick introduction of your background and who you are for the audience?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks. Mark Grundy is my name. Manage for Growth Solutions is the company that I formed 13 years ago when I accidentally came into fractional sales management. Came into Vancouver from Toronto area, and then had a friend of mine wanted to grow a particular business but couldn't afford really what I was worth, and said, "Can you help me build a sales team and build my business?" So that started the whole ball rolling, and from there, references and referrals led me to a 13-year career in helping small, mid-sized companies with their sales teams, structure, process, and accountability, and talent management in growing their organizations. It's something that I've always recognized in my heart, I guess, that I wanted to be more on the frontline sales with the sales team. Mm-hmm. In helping them achieve what they needed to achieve. But I realized that there was a whole bunch of the stuff in the back end, let's say the second layer of leadership, that I could bring to the table and help the owners sort of bridge that gap. So yeah, it's been 13 years of really good. 40 years in sales overall, 25 at the senior level, including running teams in direct sales models as well as channel sales. So I had a what I think is a wide breadth of experience I can bring to the table. And I've worked on a lot of it.
Well, I got to ask you then a very specific question. I haven't asked this in a while on these, but 40 years in sales, do me a favor and help me define what we're talking about. What's the Mark Grundy definition of sales?
That's interesting. I actually started a formal definition of sales, and what I've grown it to be, because I've come from a single bag carrying contributor, knocking on doors way back, to corporate sales and complex sales. So I think what I've really come down to is the fact that it's a process. It's a process by which you take a buyer, prospect, through their journey in making a decision about your product or service. It's quite simply just that. There's a whole bunch of points in there, but to make that work. But it's about a process in helping them make a decision of what's good for their company.
So I've asked a lot of people that question, right? And it's funny, I get a lot of different answers, but it gives me an idea where your mind is heading and how you help organizations then. So sales is a process. Sales is a process. I should say process. I know you're up in Canada. It's a process though. Sales is a process. How did you come about that as your core definition?
Through learning what it was to go through a sales engagement with a variety of types of individuals, types of business, types of selling solutions, that it really was, you've got to get something set to begin with before you can go to the next stage. Sales is about next steps. And the most important thing is it can't be about your next steps. And I've learned that it's about their next steps. It's about the buyer's next steps. And if you think from the retail transactional side to the complex solution relationship side, which has more steps in it, more touch points in the organization, it really can be very simple in that 1, 2, 3 step, or it could be 1 through 10 with one individual, then you got to go through 10 through 15 with another individual. Then you got to get them all to the table and them all agreeing and buying or nodding their heads. And it really is about, I think the key part of it is the process has to be built around value. You have to bring value to the table. What is the difference between where they are now in anything, product or service, no matter what you are? Even if you think about buying a piece of gum at a shop, I want something, I need something to change from what I have now to what I want. So there's a state change. And the key piece to the complex sale is to figure out what is that state that's going to be valuable for them to make a decision. To take it from one step, and the steps usually are, is there an identified problem? Is there a problem that this company I'm sitting with can help me with? Can we allocate some resources towards fixing the problem? Is it worth fixing the problem? Can we allocate resources, financial, people, time to fix this, given what this company is going to do for us? Is it worth it? And then you get to the decision on whether we go or not. And those steps are really just steps. You can't get to the next step before completing the step before.
So let me ask you this, because you mentioned something in your definition as well, that it's their process, right? Their process. A buyer-centric, really making this a buyer-centric. So what's your feeling on how you then scale organizations and scale sales organizations to uncover and find that? Are you more on I have these 10 steps that have to be done every single time by every single sales rep? Or are you on, so that's one side, right? The kind of the middle is we're going to set a framework for this and then allow people to play with that framework and how they go up and down. And and the other side is every single time I get into a customer, it's a new journey, right? It's a new journey with their process, uncovering and discovering their journey. Where do you find yourself along that spectrum and helping companies define this?
I think it's more on their side than it is anything else. There's a general framework of awareness and consideration and certain major pieces within a sales process. But the playbook, I think, is where things become very, very specific to the market, the product or service, and of course, more importantly, the buyer. And that is, how does the buyer want to be engaged with? How do you first attract somebody to have a conversation? Is prospecting the way to go, or is it inbound leads? Do they find your product or service more from the online world, or are they more happily engaged with the salespeople if they were to do an interruptive knock on the door or a phone call? And of course, how would you set that up and appropriately give the best chance for success in that? So the playbook and what is said, done at each one of those areas of the sales process is really the specific to the buyer. All right. I've run playbooks that basically become project management tasks within my customer base, both from a contributor and also managing a team that does this, where you have to have many people that are touch points and stakeholders, if you will, within the solution and that needs to be brought to the table. And there'll be separate playbooks for each one of them. And how best do you want to be able to have the best chance for success? Finance is always something that needs to be part of that conversation in the more complex ones, because you have to have a financial discussion around return. So from the very simple to the very complex, it's the playbook itself on how that customer wants to be specifically dealt with. If you think about buying a car on something we all have done, right? The playbook there is, from the buyer side, is to get on the dealership floor and don't talk to anybody. I just want to look around, right? On the sales side, it is, I've got to hit this person up quickly. Otherwise, my other colleagues are going to start talking to them and I'll lose a sale. Or I better start talking to them now, because generally speaking, people that get on a dealership lot, they're buying within a week. They're not there window shopping, really. But the playbook then is, from the sales side, is to get them in the car, get them to the desk, get them on paper, and then get the manager involved if you can't close the deal. It's a general playbook. On the buyer side, it is, I'm not sure if I'm ready to pull this trigger yet. I don't know if I like this car. How emotionally involved am I? Do I like this person? I like the car. I might not like the person. Do I want to continue looking around? So how do you fill that gap? And that can be extended to even the most complex of interactions that you would have with corporate stakeholders. It's how do they want to be engaged with? And And piquing interest is obviously the first step. And then putting return and value based on the 4 value blocks of business, which is how do we make more money, save more money? How do we make it easy? How do we save you time? Which can roll up to the first or the second one, which is saving money. Buyer playbooks, very important.
So I had an interesting conversation it was on a podcast, actually. It was a friend, one of my friends, Des, is over in the UK. And we were talking about this concept of playbooks and how sometimes they're seen differently and different. So I'm going to ask you to go deeper in that, but different cultures, see these a little different. He's like, I'm in the UK. We're a soccer. He said football, but we're a soccer nation, right? A playbook is a general framework that you give for people, and then you go and you just can make things happen. The U.S., on the other side, a playbook is once you are in X situation, these are exactly the things that you must do to make something happen, because we're an American football culture, right? This is what you have. You have a 65-page playbook that you go to and you call different plays. And we were riffing on that a little bit, but dive into what is your ultimate when you're talking Canadian. So if maybe we're talking hockey analogy here, but what is a great playbook look like? What are the components of it, and how do you help roll that out?
Yeah, there's some key pieces within the playbooks that I like to design for a team. It all revolves around the first part is what is the key questions that we need to get answered for. We need to understand what tools can we bring to the table, for that to find out that particular question. We need to know what are those questions that we need to be asking, those conversations that we need to be starting at that particular stage. So it'd be a list out of particular topics that we want to get involved with, particular people that need to be involved with, the identification of who needs to be at the table or on the call for that particular stage, and that playbook to run in that stage. And then, of course, I think the final one is what is the exit criteria? What do we want to I always say to my sales teams is there's 3 questions that you need to ask before you get into any sort of conversation or meeting with anybody. And number 1, what's the objective? Number 2, what are the barriers to that objective and how are you going to overcome them? And number 3, what's the minimum, as we all know, the minimum negotiated next step to keep this deal or this conversation going? And that could be as little as a calendared next step. It's the most important piece, but the exit piece needs to be identified. So for those 4 or 5 areas, and that's different from one company, one solution to the buyers involved in that solution. I'm working with some playbooks now for some companies that, we're building a set of tools and what we call competitor battle cards, because we find that the question came up, well, how are you making the decision to the buyer? Well, we do analyze. We'd like to see what else is available from the competitors. So question would be, if you had that readily available for you, would that make your decision process easier, maybe a little quicker to make? Absolutely, saves me a lot of time. This is a commercial service operation, so it's not something that's really strategic, but it's on the desk. They want to get it off the desk. So how do we make it easy for them to make this decision? Provide them an overview of the competitor landscape. Have that available for the sales team to be able to bring out at a certain point in the conversation. So those areas for each of these stages. And we talk about pipeline stages, getting into qualified, new qualified, to discovery, or discovery, then qualified, then presentation, and then close. But there could be different ones, right? Those are the 4 or 5 basic ones. And I don't like to run too many more than 5 stages, to be honest with you, because it's the playbook that's the heart of each one of those stages. Anybody can do a process in terms of the standardized process, but what's happening in the playbook? What does the salesperson need to say, do, and achieve at each one of those areas? How do they do it in each one of those areas to continue forward?
Right. No, that's great. That's great perspective and feedback on that. I really appreciate how you dove in there. Let's talk about how you got there. I am fascinated. You said earlier that you spent 40 years in sales. So, and came by it accidentally. What was that first gig in sales, and how did it get you? Give me a little journey about how you got here.
My first gig in sales, actually, I was 19 and I was brought on as an inside sales rep for a hydraulic company in Ontario. I spent some time there and then I moved. Actually, I started believe it or not, I took a year off. I didn't know what I was going to do, like most people. When I started this, it was actually a cylinder repair technician. But I guess they recognized something in me about my inquisitiveness, maybe my curiosity in terms of the customers we had, and they moved me to the inside sales desk. That was before the recession in the early 80s. Now I'm going to date myself because I've been through 3 recessions. So that was the first one, and our major customers were the big steel industries in Hamilton. So from there, where did I go next? Oh, I went into technology. Cars. I started cars. I went from there to retail cars because I was a gear. I wanted to sell cars.
That's
so
awesome.
I sold cars for 4 years. And you know what? It's a great job if you want to learn how to close properly. Properly. I think the industry's changed a little bit since then, but it was a great place to learn how to close and establish relationships with customers. And I had customers for those 4 years. From there, I went into technology, and I started in storage subsystems and worked with a great company, and we became a darling here in Canada. From there, I went to graphic cards and to a competitor of NVIDIA way back called ATI Technologies. And I ran the Canadian distribution side of that business on the sales side for 4 years.
So was that your first? Sorry to interrupt there, but was that your first foray into management?
That would have been a start. I started in management a little bit before that, but yeah, that would have been the first management side of it. And then really when I went into my own business and worked for a information consolidation, email archiving, and attempted to grow the team here in Canada. Then worked in healthcare and had a team director of sales for healthcare, software, client server technology. And we had 4 reps there, plus marketing communications, and grew that to be very substantial here in Canada. And then in the recession, the Great Recession of 08, 09, I guess it was, bit of a life change there. I came out to Vancouver, and that's where I started in this fractional sales management. Because I'd done I went to the corporate side. I went to the corporate side, and I realized that I was losing touch with the frontline salespeople. And that's really where the heart is, working with them so that they can be successful. I find that there's a bit of a disconnect sometimes in that management piece from the owner to the frontline salespeople. They don't have the time. They don't have necessarily the skill to run a sales team, and they don't have the cost to bring on somebody that might have the experience to do it for them.
So I couldn't agree with you more on the disconnect between the front line and the C-suite. How do you close that gap? I mean, coming in as a fractional, I know we're going off script here. These are not that, but how do you help close that gap? The playbook, but what about closing the gap between the people? I think that's one of the biggest things because, as you said, that's where the heart is beating in a lot of these companies is that frontline sales. So how do you shrink that gap and ensure that you can be growing the sales team as well as growing the revenue?
I think it comes down to establishing that culture. I was very fortunate to work under some really good managers, and I also worked for some that aren't so good. And I always wanted to have good management as a sales rep. And one of the things that I wanted to have is that I wanted to have somebody who was a mentor, who was somebody that I could rely on to keep me accountable to the things that I need, because it's a lonely world out there in sales. It's probably the hardest job outside of being a CEO and maybe having upper management with a lot of responsibility. But in terms of that single contributor role in an organization, it's the toughest job because things aren't necessarily structured as they're coming at you, and you have to work in an unstructured world. So accountability, I think, and being with the team on a regular basis, regularly scheduled, doing one-on-one pipeline accountability reviews. Where are we? What's moving? What's closing? Keeping them accountable to not only what their objectives are, but what their personal objectives are, because I want to get to know the team members and work with them to enhance their own motivation. Somebody said to me once, how do you bring on motivated people? And I said, well, I make sure they're motivated first. I can't motivate anybody that's not motivated, but I want to enhance that. One-on-one accountability, and then I separate actually the accountability from the coaching side of the business or the engagement. I think that's important because sometimes that accountability discussion is a different tone and it's a different type of message that you might be wanting to get through. And the coaching side is individual, either on skill and or deal, progression and closing. So you're asking a lot of questions and helping them get through it, whereas On the accountability side, you're looking for facts. You're trying to get through that very quickly without a lot of diversion and excuses, and keeping it very clean. And I think that the windshield time, really spending what I call windshield. I work directly with the sales organizations. I am local. I have a few remote clients, but the ones that I work with very successfully are the ones that I can actually get in the car and let's go visit some clients. Let's work together for a morning, a couple hours, whatever. Let me get to know how you're working. Let me get to know our customers so that I can help you move things forward.
The accountability meeting versus coaching meeting and how you change that. Do you do accountability as a group setting, or you'd like doing more one-on-one? I know you said accountability or coaching is one-on-one, but I love that split. But how do you operationalize it?
Separate, individual, one-on-one can be as quick as 15 minutes, can be no more than really 20 minutes to half an hour. Each person on a weekly or whatever prescribes for the sales cycle and the business itself. But it has to be regular. It has to be timely. It could be bi-weekly, weekly. I have some, and it has to be by rep too. I have some reps that I'm managing right now that are extremely, well, they're hitting it out of the park. So, I mean, it's really about getting together with them maybe once every month and getting an update from them. And then, how can I clear the way for you? But making sure that I'm touching base with them and getting, a bit more than just what I see in the CRM or on their weekly reports. I'm having a conversation with them about deals. And then I have the ones that are really struggling. So those are a bit more, but it's strictly kept to accountability, one-on-one, direct. And then with those reps, I would be saying, let's do some coaching. Let's get together and do some coaching. And then, of course, there's the offer for the ones that are really hitting it out of the park. Let's get together. If you want to, I'm available. I'd like to come out and maybe visit with you with a client or something.
Yeah, that time and that plus the windshield time, I think, is one of the things it's one of the reasons I really appreciate the ability to have a fractional model like yourself, so you can bring an executive presence that can have that and dedicate that time. But I also think it's one of the things that gets lost in when a lot of people manage to over efficiency. Again, that's my take on it. But when you dive in with sales teams, do you mind? What are some of the core challenges that are facing the teams that you're working with continually? Like what do you see that says, man, this is a pain I can help solve? And by extension, that's going to tell us, what are the pains in the market up in your neck of the woods?
I think number one, lead quality, where the team is being directed. And I think that's a solid responsibility of management, frontline sales management, but also the senior leadership to make sure that the team is pointed in the right direction. And I think that if you have a team that is, surviving on inbound leads, then they're coming from all over the place. So you've got to make sure that your marketing messaging is on point, that we're getting, as they say, the MQLs are matching up with really our value position in the marketplace. And we're spending time with people that are more apt to be qualified down the road than ones that aren't. So I think that lead quality and lead volume issues. I think that in today's marketplace, I speak to a lot of sales reps that are been in sales for maybe 10 years or less, that are surviving too much on the inbound lead generation, surviving on marketing to generate that, and not doing enough on the self-sourcing side. They're not picking up the phone. They're not taking responsibility for their own pipeline generation. They're relying on, and those are the reps that I find that are going from one company to another company, trying to find that place that is going to provide them with the people coming in the door. And I think that's changing a lot now. I think that, if anything, getting to up here in Canada, it's been a little softer in the marketplace, shall we say, in North America. So I find that my sales reps need to be coached a lot. And I'm looking for, when I do recruiting programs for my clients, and I only do recruiting for my clients, I don't do it as a side piece, that I'm looking for people that have that ability to be resilient, have drive, have the curiosity and empathy that's needed to get out there and make connections in our marketplace. In again, being focused, management targets where we need to go and provides the tools of which we can have those conversations and engage with customers. But it's up to the sales rep to at least spend 20-25% of their, shall we say, their activity focus on self-sourcing their own pipeline. I think that's key. I think process inconsistency is another one. I think that there's a lot of people that they don't have that process.
So, and how do you see AI factoring into this from your standpoint? And I know you work with a lot of the more industrial and manufacturing and that type of company. How do you see AI tying in challenges or opportunities, or do you?
Well, I think we can both agree, being senior, officers in sales, that there's technology overload. We have tech stacks that are probably a little bit too top heavy. We've got to the point where we're clamoring onto enrichment technologies, email platforms, everything that we can to try and fill that top of the funnel, if you will. But I think that AI, for the most part, has added to that as a curiosity. I'm a firm believer that it will be a efficiency multiplier for sales. It will not replace sales, and I don't believe any of that, because I still believe that the more complex you get in sales, that the human interaction will never go away. I think that human-to-human confirmation of running through ideas and solutions and getting trust factored in, that the human-human touch will never go away. What will happen is that a lot of the research, a lot of the pre-qualification structure, process design can help in the consideration, maybe the awareness consideration, if you want to follow that old marketing sort of flow. Marketing awareness consideration phase can help tremendously. It can help position products. Go to market plans can be drawn up very effectively. I think you'll find the product market fit for the organizations are going to be, the timeline to get to product market fit is going to be severely reduced, right? I think AI can be a huge multiplier in the efficiency and well, first of all, also being effective. You got to be effective first before you can have efficiency. But I think both avenues that AI is going to be. I think right now it's still in a what feel out stage. What can we do? I use it. I ask my sales reps to use it in terms of researching a particular customer or client and against the competition. We've some very simple stuff, but I don't want it necessarily writing my LinkedIn responses or my emails. If I can't do that, then I think I've got a problem with the sales rep, not necessarily because we're trying to put AI in the piece.
Amen. And I'd love, in our final 5 minutes or so here, I think AI is one of the big disruptions. Second big disruption that we've had, like especially in your industries that you're working with, and we've had here in North America, has been the tariffs and the border and those type of things. What's going on, and what are you hearing about that up in your neck of the woods that could be educational for the rest of us?
Well, I think the obvious thing was that the Canadian relied too much on the U.S. market, and that's not a detriment. That was just we're good partners and friends, and we had a lot of things that we relied on the U.S. market to fulfill our corporate needs, and it was easy. It was just down south. We sold a lot more to the United States, still do, than the United States buys from us. So when the tariff discussion started, there was a lot, especially in the auto sector and the industrials, and even some of those organizations that feed those markets, like software and computer systems and technology communications and whatnot, started going into what happened, and the conversation just stopped. In terms of making proper business decisions going forward, because we didn't know. There was a lot of upheaval in terms of when, how much, what's the response, how does that all affect us, and people were not making plans. Right now, I think we've discovered that there is something going to be there, and the conversations now are, look, let's just factor in this, let's go. Let's make sure we start planning. We can't sit on our hands for another 6 months trying to wait for we've got to take control of our destiny. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean from a business side, we've got to make plans, and we've got to make plans accordingly, right? And if that means that we're going to have X percent as an increase in our costs, then we have to factor that in and deal with it. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to sell the States or anything like that. It's just, it was a bit more of a shock up here than it was probably, that I know it was, because I've had conversations with some colleagues in the States. And I think we're coming through that now. And I think we're at least I am having a lot more engaged conversations with business owners about how to plan their sales teams around it. What do we need to do? And I think really what is happening is that now they recognize that they do need to be more efficient or effective in the field. who are they targeting, how they're targeting, how are they engaging, how are they moving them through. The old classic of sales cycle, close rate, and average deal value, the three trifecta of sales metrics are now coming to the forefront. How do we gain or make it more efficient in each one of those?
Well, I really appreciate that perspective. And then diving in, you had also mentioned, we were talking a little bit before this, that you're seeing an increased impact of and this is not to dive too deep politically, but an increased impact on the free trade aspect of what we're doing between the states, and that not everything that people thought was going to be tariffed actually is. How is that impacting business?
I think from the opening up of conversations, people are realizing, because we're hearing now that a lot of businesses that did move products and services, products really, across the border may not have been actually under the free trade agreement. It's costly to become approved. It's lengthy. It's almost like becoming an ISO, to be honest with you. So I think a lot of companies did not have that in letter form. They didn't have that required. They didn't have that. And they basically might have had a bit of a duty on it, or they didn't have any duties. But now the administration has said it's going to be 30% on steel, aluminum, 50% on aluminum, I think it is, and steel. And then a variety of other. Now that's a huge hit. So now they're saying, let's get in there and let's get recognized under the U.S. Canada Free Trade Agreement. So we've gone from about 65% of the stuff that was going across the border that was under the tariff agreement to about 85-90% now, which tells me, and from what I've been reading and hearing from people, is that a lot more people are now becoming compliant with that agreement and actually getting the certification for it. I think a lot of the stuff that goes across the borders is under the free trade, food included. When you think about where it comes from, the content in North America, if it's North American content, if it's North American made, then really it can go across that border. The question is, and I think that's why we reduced Canada just announced that they're taking off the reciprocal tariffs that they put on things, because they realized that maybe because of this, now we're hurting ourselves more than we are anything else. So anybody else.
Well, I appreciate you diving into that, because it's interesting, because you hear it on the front lines, you hear people talking about it, and then you hear it from the news, and it's kind of different, completely different. But I'm getting the feeling here in the U.S. I know that's what we talked about, but there was a pause, and the pause is coming to an end as people start to see, hey, it's business. We got to make things happen. We're gonna shift. We don't, it's not going to be turbulent forever. Let's figure it out. And I always relate that back to sales, right? It's like, if I'm in this profession, that is my profession. There's always going to be something shifting. There's always going to be something changing. How do I then take the next step, decide that I'm going to move forward or not move forward with a particular client, and then choose where I want to spend my time? Right. But it sounds like the markets take a lot longer to build that in, but it just is a part of our gig. And I think it's one of the things that I love about sales. It's also one of the things that people don't get about it, is that we're highly process driven, but that process is made to be so that we can be playbook intensive and more flexible on the field, rather than checking off every single box that needs to be checked off on. So
thank you for saying that. And I think checking boxes is what we want to get away from, right? It's not checking boxes. I think a lot of sales teams have been managed to the point where they are checking boxes, unfortunately. And we need to be more creative out there. And we need a management system and managers that are going to help salespeople be creative within the playbook. And a playbook is iterative, right? I mean, it's dynamic. It changes. It morphs. And if we go through these between our partner countries and we have to change, then we have to change. And again, to your point, resilience is a factor that salespeople have. We get to pivot. Right? Not a lot of people in the organization can pivot in what they do. We get to pivot a little bit to achieve the objectives that we need to do.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, this has been awesome. I love diving in with you. How do people find you if they want to reach out and chat more with you.
Fantastic. Love to hear from anybody. Catch me on LinkedIn at Mark F. Grundy, and you'll find a little bit about who I am, what I can do there. I also have a website at mfgsolutions.ca. Yeah, hook me up. Let's have a chat.
All right. Well, fantastic. And one thing I know about all of our conversations, you're always going to get a good conversation with Mark. He's always going to bring some value. And so if you are up in that area, have any sort of questions whatsoever, I would highly recommend reaching out and having a chat. Any final thoughts as we close out today's episode?
Yeah, just, you know what, just stay resilient, right? Be out there, make your day as productive as possible, achieve those little tasks, connect with those people, talk to your manager. Reach out to your manager, tell them you want to get some coaching, you want to be successful, and your manager should be able to help you do that.
Well, everybody, thank you very much, Mark. Everybody, keep shining bright. Have an amazing week. We'll publish again next week, but make sure you like, subscribe, and share, and let's get Mark's message out there so more people can be hearing it. And with that, we'll say goodbye from the Art, Science, and Complex Sales.
Thank you, Paul.